We're good. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jim Wieser, the Wieser Podcast. Glad to be with you today, as always. In preparing for today's podcast, which here in Indiana is Election Day, by the way, and it's our midterm election, and that's supposed to be what I'm talking about, and it is, but specifically today, I think that it's important that we all sit back and reflect just for a second about our ability to vote and the challenges that we face as a democracy. Unfortunately, in this day and time when you would have thought, after 50 years of the Civil Rights Act and 50 years of the Voting Rights Act, that we wouldn't be faced with what we are. But the Supreme Court decided last week in a case involving the state of Louisiana to turn the clock back and take us to a time we all thought was past. And that's what we want to talk about today. And so I'm pleased to, at this time, I'm going to be introducing my guest. I just want to do just a little bit of a lead-in to this before we get to Earl here. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, and I started to think about that, and I thought that thing was, I hate to date myself, but that thing was adopted, literally a week before I left for college. That's when I left for college. It was adopted in mid to late August, as I recall, of 1965. And at that time, it was such a major feat and meant so much to so many people, many of whom have been disenfranchised for a long time. And we have celebrated that for years. And what it was, of course, the 65 Act was sort of reinforcing and then giving us the ability to enforce actually the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, which was adopted after the Civil War, post-Civil War, to ensure that folks, in fact, I actually printed it out. I know most people think that lawyers, we have the Constitution memorized. We don't, but I know enough about it to be dangerous, as someone said a few minutes ago. And so the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, very explicit, very plain, prohibits the federal government or any state from denying or abridging a citizen's right to vote. And I'm looking for the rest of the quote, and I don't have it, but it's for abridging the right to vote, regardless of race or color, or actually in that case, and it also said previous servitude, but that doesn't apply here. But that's what it said. But for many, many years, it sort of was ignored. I mean, from the time that it was passed till maybe probably right after the Depression and the Roosevelt administration, and then especially the Truman administration started thinking about civil rights and started acting on civil rights and started either restoring and or reinforcing them, and culminating in the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So kind of having set the stage, I'd like to introduce my guest at this time. I was very privileged, and I sincerely mean this. Two of the really finest people I met in my political career and my elected official career happen to be your parents. Earl's father was a fine guy, a great legislator. And Earl's mom was there all the time. She was the woman behind the man.
True. Very true. Yes.
And they were a wonderful pair. gave so much to the community, so much to our state, and Earl has had the good fortune, and he earned it. Earl's sitting here with me now, to have followed in both of their footsteps, and and currently serving his legislative district in Lake County, Indiana, and is a legislator in where I live, and I've always been proud to not only know him, but also to had the good fortune of being the Democratic county chairman for 8 years and spending a lot of time with him and really getting to know him. And Earl has long fought vigorously in the legislature for rights, for civil rights, for everyone, but particularly he's the chairman of the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus.
Correct.
So he knows of which he speaks, and he's very informed. And I thought I couldn't think of a better person to bring on here so he and I could kind of bat it back and forth and have a discussion about what the impact of that Supreme Court decision last week by the 6 conservative justices means right now, currently, especially in this frenzy of redistricting that's been taking place. And how do you address it? How do you respond to it? And then where do we go from here? Yeah. So having said all of that, I'd like at this time to introduce to all of you State Representative Earl Harris. Earl, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words you just said about my parents. I miss them a lot, and I'm proud to follow in their footsteps. Yeah. Very glad to have the seat that my father had for 33 years until he passed away in March of 15. And then my mother was elected to complete his term. And then I was elected, and Mom passed away about 2.5 years. So it's hard to believe that they've both been gone that long. But this is my 10th year in office, and it has gone by just like that.
Real quick, doesn't it?
Very fast, very fast. So we've had, is it a Chinese proverb? May you live in interesting times? I think we're living in interesting times on steroids.
Yes.
You look at what has just happened. Representative Dr. Vernon Smith and I were in Michigan City as part of a panel. It was really on education, but then, when crowd questions came up, this came up because it was fresh, just happened. And I kind of compared it to, because we heard, we don't need, and I know we'll get into a little bit more of the background of, as you said, the Voting Rights Act of 65 and what it means moving forward. But, we've heard, we don't need this anymore. Everything is fair. Everything is good. We don't have any racism. All these excuses that are just inaccurate. And so my comparison was, I said, okay, so you go to your doctor for your physical. Your doctor says, hey, your cholesterol level is very high. I'm going to put you on a statin because we need to bring this down because that gets dangerous. A year later, you go for your physical, and your numbers in terms of your cholesterol level have gone down, and you say to your doctor, great, I don't have to take the medicine anymore. And he or she says, no, you actually do. Well, why? My numbers are good. Well, your numbers are good because you take the medicine. So that's what I compare this to, is the people who are saying, everything is fine now. Everything is fine now because we had things in place to provide protections, and eliminating Section 2 is a big blow in terms of taking away those protections. And in fact, we've seen immediately Louisiana, even though they had early voting had started, so people had started voting already, they're going to do redistricting. So basically, I guess that means if you voted already, that's insignificant. And then if I have my notes correctly, and I know we're recording on Election Day, so depending on when people watch and listen to this, I believe Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi have also announced they're going to redo their maps. So it's having an immediate impact on what's going on.
Right, and not only that, but if I'm correct, Louisiana's governor ordered the election stopped.
Yeah.
The election was in process, folks.
Right.
Early voting had occurred, and they stopped it completely so they could gerrymander consistent with the Supreme Court's decision.
Yeah, which really goes to show you why the Supreme Court's decision was so bad, because they were like, "Hey, great, thanks for the freedom, and we're gonna go change things immediately." I mean, they didn't even wait and go, "Okay, well, we'll wait till maybe 2 years, the next one in 2 years," but they're going at it now. So it's really showing that whole argument of, "Oh, everything's fine now, so we don't need this," is not the case at all. There's a reason why these protections were put in place. It's going to have an immediate impact on the makeup of Congress and how districts are created and whom we could vote for. And then it's not only this year, but what will happen in 2 years? What will happen down the line? So this is going to be there's going to be a long-term impact on this, and what it really means to black minority voters. And then, we kind of talked about this a little bit before we started. If you're a woman, are you next? So it's going to have a negative impact on what's going on in our country in terms of how districts are made, how the racial makeup, and whom has representation and whom's the representation that may go away.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. I think you're so right about that. Just an overall concern that I have is we're experiencing, and I know you are down at the legislature, we're experiencing some, really polarized times right now.
Unfortunately, yeah.
We really are. It isn't, I've had discussions with this about Pete Visclosky, our former congressman, with Evan Bayh, our former governor and senator. Both of them pretty much said, we don't even recognize Washington, D.C. anymore. We don't even recognize Congress.
Yeah.
And Evan's very strong about when he and I talk about, I just couldn't work in that kind of situation anymore. I was always able to work across the aisle when I was governor, even when I was a senator. Couldn't do it anymore. So a concern I have is it's just going to be like the gold rush. It's going to let's all rush in and see who can redistrict and how we can redistrict, how soon we can do it,
right.
and create districts that just don't meet what we've always been used to about districts that are compatible, that represent communities of interest. That's all by the wayside. It's just pure politics.
Let's take what happened here in Indiana. And, as you know, we started the 2026 legislative session in December of 25.
Right.
So we went in for 2 weeks to do redistricting. And I really have to give Republicans in the Senate that really did the work to stop this from happening, because they knew it was not right. And there were some Republican representatives that, also. And, a lot they're being, with this election day, so they have the president of the United States and the governor that are running people against them, and they had threats on their lives and their families. So I want to acknowledge that they were very brave in standing up. But when you look at the makeup, what was potentially going to happen here in Indiana if it had passed, we have 9 congressional districts. We have 2 of them are represented by Democrats, Frank Mervan, who's our person here in Northwest Indiana, and Andre Carson in Indianapolis. When you look at the way the districts were going to be cut up, Congressional District 1, and we had a map and I spoke on the floor on this. Congressional District 1 is really a Northwest Indiana district. It was going to go into Eastern Indiana, and really I would say almost central, because it headed towards Kokomo.
It sure did.
When you look at Indianapolis, where Andre Carson represents all of Indianapolis was going to be split up amongst, 3 or 4 congressional districts that ran from Indianapolis down to state lines. And then you had some ridiculousness of 2 things I want to point out, and there's more than that, but just the 2 things I want to point out that are ridiculous. You had one precinct in Indianapolis was split up amongst 3 congressional districts. So if I remember correctly, if you lived on one corner, you were in one congressional district. I live on another corner. I was in another congressional district. Our wonderful producer, if she lived on the third corner,
Yeah.
she was in another congressional district. That was crazy. And then those congressional districts split up majority black areas. So it was doing what we're talking about now, which is splitting up and taking away the minority vote from the voters to choose whom they want. So we know it, without those protections, we've already seen that it's going to happen and that states are going to work on this.
You know, it's so disheartening, and trying to figure out how this is going to be reconciled in the overall scheme of things is very difficult to conceive. I don't know what you think. Just to throw it out, I always thought that, and not always, but I came to the point some years ago that the only way this I felt could be a properly approached would be the formation of some independent type of redistricting commission. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know, as long as it's political in this climate,
right?
It's just not. It's not going to work, and it's not going to be fair.
I may have this wrong, so if I say this incorrectly and you know better, correct me. But I believe in 21 was the John Lewis Voter Act, I believe it was called. I may have that wrong, but I believe that basically did what you said. I know it would have eliminated this whole gerrymandering, and as I remember it, the vote was along party lines. The majority Republicans in Congress voted no, Democrats voted yes, so it was defeated. So we've had an opportunity to do that. The party that was in the majority, being Republicans, voted it down. So that's why we're a little bit more where we are now.
Well, that leads me to something I recall John Lewis said many years ago, and I'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to go back real quick. Representative Harris has pointed out that we had a strong contingent of Republicans who refused to go along with Trump's desire to redistrict so they could control everything, and they were brave for that. But they're being primaried.
Yeah.
And I'll give one example. There's a state representative from our district, I think it's District 1, Senate District 1, Dan Durnall,
yeah,
who's one that stood up to the Trump push and the onslaught and the threats and did the moral thing and did the right thing and voted against the midterm redistricting. And he right now has an opponent who has no background in government or politics at all, but who has had hundreds of thousands of dollars poured into his campaign in dark money, not money from here, not money from his constituents, not money from the interests that he represents, and is in danger of being primaried.
He'll know today what his
he'll
future.
know. He'll know by the end of today, and the sad thing about it is it doesn't reflect the will of his constituents. It doesn't. And it goes to something you and I also talked about before we got on here is, get your butts out of bed and vote. Please, folks, you got to vote. And we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
But back to John Lewis, I always thought one of his great quotes during the civil rights movement that he participated in, starting with Reverend King and on through, and John Lewis is a man that suffered a lot of personal indignity and personal pain and
physical
suffering,
abuse. Yeah.
physical abuse. But he always said, and this goes to, I wonder where we go from here, because he would always say, there's just times when you need to cause trouble. And he said, necessary trouble.
Good trouble.
Good trouble.
Yeah, good trouble.
Good trouble, necessary trouble. Sounds like maybe an oxymoron. It doesn't, but it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not. And maybe we could take from there. Where do you go from here?
I think so. you talked about Senator Durnell, and I'll give you another senator that he's being primaried. Senator Good, he's a Republican. He's in the Terre Haute area. He used to be, so I've known him for, I think, my entire legislative career because he was actually worked in education before becoming elected. He had as I know the story, he had a town hall, and basically, and they only let in people that showed in their ID they were in his district. So they didn't want other people outside impacting this. And he had a town hall, and I want to say it was something like 75 people. And he asked them, I work for you. I represent you. How do you want me to vote? 100% of the people said no. Now, you know that was not an all-Democrat crowd because he's a Republican. So, and Republicans, as I remember it, by polling did not want this. So, you know, I know it takes bravery, as you kind of said, Lewis's comment about good trouble, necessary trouble. It takes bravery. It takes us getting engaged. You know, he's like Durnell, Good, there's some others. They knew that they were going to have to deal with this, and they decided because what's best was what was right, and they're doing this. It's going to be is that we have to continue to fight. The other thing you brought up, which I think is highly important. So when the bill was in committee, I was one of a long list of people that spoke. The person that spoke before me was from the Heritage Foundation, not an Indiana person. And that's one of the things I talked about is this is an Indiana thing. Why are we doing something to help a person keep power outside of that's in the White House, outside of the state, and about these people coming in and spreading what is false information. And one of the things he said before, as I was waiting to speak, he said, Indiana is a red state. It should be 9-0 in terms of Congress. Now, if you look at Indiana, President Trump only won 58% of the vote. Governor Braun won 54% of the vote. That does not scream red to me.
Not at all.
And so, as you pointed out, we have these out, and I looked right at, because I am who I am. I looked him in the eye when I said this, and he just smiled and nodded his head because he knew I had him. But that has been a huge factor, is this outside people, outside money coming into Indiana to try to take control. And I think that's why even Republicans were so upset about redistricting, because they did not like that idea of outsiders coming in telling us what to do. So we need to, all of us, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, no party, or as I like to jokingly say with some fun, is that the I like to eat cake party, whatever party you're in and involved with, need to step up and realize this isn't really a Republican Democrat thing. This is a what is right, and how do we keep us as Indiana people making decisions about Indiana.
Yeah, you know, you're so right, Earl, and it's it is a moral. It's really a moral issue.
Yeah,
and it's difficult to think that a democracy such as the United States would find ourselves where we're at right now, and not getting into foreign policy and all that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is that we're certainly not respected around the world as we used to be. And I don't want to get off on tangents about starting wars that nobody can explain why you did and things of that nature. But when it comes to the governance of these 50 states, I just am very concerned that we're going to find ourselves that every state is just going to be so polarized, and it's going to be so difficult. And when that happens, you get nothing done.
Correct.
You know, and if it does get done, it's going to be on a partisan, one party or the other basis, and that almost screams ipso facto it's not good.
Yeah, it does. You know, and I'm glad you said that, because I'm a Democrat, been a Democrat my entire life, but I agree with you. If it's all right or all left or all Democrat or all Republican, it doesn't matter which one, it's not good. There needs to be a mixture of people in both parties that are in office and making decisions, so you have a diverse, wide voices heard to come out with and make the best decisions in terms of legislation and in terms of how your state runs. So that's a great point you make.
Well, let me ask you. You're in a position of being the leader of the Black Legislative Caucus. In that capacity, do you cross paths with, or are you engaged with similar organizations in other states?
Yeah, there is, and I have to say, this is actually my last year. Representative Jackson will be she's the vice chair. She will be taking over as chair. So my term is coming in.
She's a hometown
yeah,
girl.
She's
so
another
that's
hometown
okay,
person
yeah.
here in Northwest Indiana. Yeah, there are opportunities to connect with other people. I think you know this also. I'm also half Mexican, so I'm half Black, half Mexican.
Yes.
And then on the national level, there's an organization called Board of Latino Legislative Leaders, which is Latinos in state houses that are in leadership positions. So I'm the vice chair of that. So there are opportunities to have those kind of conversations, whether it's like Board of Latino, we meet twice a year. There's also a National Hispanic Caucus. There's National Black Caucus. Mm-hmm. There's a Tri-Caucus, which also brings in Asians. And then different states have different things. So, yeah, because some of the issues, things to deal with, whether I live here in Indiana or whether you live in New York or California or Alabama or Tennessee or wherever, there's similar issues. So it's a good opportunity, and we do have some connectivity and talk. I will tell you, when we were going through things with redistricting here in Indiana, we actually met with a representative, or was it two, from Texas, because they had already gone through it from their Black Caucus. So
yes,
there's that type of, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what strategies did you use? What kind of messaging did you use, et cetera? So those connectivity points are important and good to have.
Yeah, I was trying to do a little bit of reading from other perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
and I pull up this one, and it says, and I thought it made a good point. It says the Roberts Court,
Yeah.
which is our current court.
And he's been involved in trying to take out and end the Voting Rights Act for a long time. It's one of his missions.
I had no idea that was the case. Mm-hmm. And then I did some further reading and was watching a panel discussion on television. And the fact of the matter is that he started in the DOJ as an attorney assigned for that specific purpose.
Yeah. This is not a new thing with
20,
him.
25 years under a Bush administration.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And folks, I'm glad that you knew that. What's happening in our country, specifically in our country, relative to the diminution of what we believe to be inherent, both constitutional rights and inherent rights that folks have, whether it be Black or Hispanic or women, has been under attack, and we don't realize. We think, well, the Supreme Court just made this decision. This just came up. No. They have been. When I say they, the groups like the Heritage Foundation,
right?
Manifestos like Project 2025, all this stuff from that side of the aisle has been undergoing changes and undergoing radical I don't know the exact word, just radical changes that take place for 20, 30 years. I mean, it's really been a long time, and it's shocking to think that people would be sitting around, I don't care if it's a think tank or I don't care what it is, and say, okay, how can we screw somebody today? I mean, I don't get it. It's just,
I may have this wrong, but was Karl Rove called the architect, where his theory was go after state houses leading to this?
That was Karl Rove.
Yeah, I think it was Karl Rove. So you're right. That's decades. Yeah. This is not a new thing.
No.
This has been decades in the planning, and we've hit a point where it's hitting hard and things are happening pretty fast.
Right, and it's true. But just to give you an idea about how you can just peck away at it and get your point across and chip away everything. It says the Roberts courts have substantially weakened the Voting Rights Act in a series of rulings.
Right. Yeah.
So they had Shelby County versus Holder, and where the court nullified, it said, and if I could read that word there, for states with a history of racial discrimination in voting, and saying that, well, we don't have to worry about it now. We've got the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, so that's all obsolete. Mm-hmm. Then they come right back and get rid of what they claim was the protection that you had.
Yeah.
And now it's no longer obsolete. But the jurisdictions would have previously been covered by pre-clearance, subsequently enacted, cuts to. So what happened is, pre-clearance, way back in the day when they had the poll tax and all that kind of stuff.
The grandparent, your grandfather had to vote.
Yeah,
for you to vote. Yeah.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Well, that got taken away, and that was wonderful, and that was great. But then what they do now is, here's what they do: they chip away at it by either eliminating, reducing, or challenging, as the legislature recently in Indiana tried to do with early voting. Mm-hmm. Okay, early voting, which has been wildly successful in Indiana since it was adopted in 2008, so much so that the community I live in here in northwest Indiana is the town of Cherville, which is about 35,000 people. And in the 2024 election, the early voting and voting on election day were almost equal.
Yeah.
And the early voting had only been in existence for 15 or 16 years. Mm-hmm. But when people realized the convenience of it and the opportunity to do it, the voting totals just went crazy. And now it's like this isn't just something that's helpful. It's something that's become a routine in people's lives.
Yeah, it makes sense. I would tell you when my mother was still alive, and actually, you go back even further, when my aunt and uncle were alive and lived next door to us, I would take them to early voting. I would literally, and my mother would get the phone call from me, I would go by the courthouse on Main Street and see if there was a long line or not, if I was coming home from a meeting or coming home from wherever, the store or whatever. And if it was a long line, I wouldn't worry. I'd just go home. If there wasn't a line or it was short, I would call my mother and say, let's go vote. Because I didn't want my mother and then my aunt and uncle, who were, when they were alive and living next door, elderly, to have to stand in a long line.
Right.
It was just not good for them.
Right.
So a short line meant this is the time we go vote, get early voting, and take care of it. So it really, when you look at helping people, because we really should make voting easier, not put up guardrails. It's such a vital tool, and I love the fact of being able to vote early. I mean, I do, and I voted 2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, vote, get in there, get your votes, get your voice heard, and keep going.
Yeah, and it's also, a lot of people don't even realize, but it's really almost a practical necessity, for example, for people who work on Election Day at the polling places.
Or work in general.
Depending
on what your work schedule is, or you get held late. Oh, I get off at 5, I have time. Oh, wait, now I have to work over. Yeah. You're done. You can't vote.
Done. And especially where we're located in northwest Indiana, where many thousands of our citizens work in Chicago.
Yeah.
It really is important. And then the other and another example, the one that really frosts me and people don't understand, is the voter ID laws. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was on a commission back in 2004, I guess, when the first voter ID law came into effect in Indiana, and it was really pushed by our then Secretary of State, Todd Rokita, who's now, unfortunately, our Attorney General, Todd Rokita. And he and I, we just really battled it out over voter ID laws, so much so that, just truth be told, a couple, maybe about 6 months ago, my law partner, who is also the Cherville Town Judge, was at a judicial conference and was identified as being a partner in the firm of Wieser and Wiley. And the Attorney General was there, Todd Rokita, who is, by the way, from Munster, Indiana, in our area, and came up to my law partner. He says, "Are you Jim Wieser's law partner?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And he just looked at him and says, "Does he still hate me?" Which, of course, I don't. I don't hate Todd. But my law partner says to him, "Yes, I believe he does." But anyway, photo IDs. okay, we have a photo ID. We've gotten used to it in the state of Indiana. We've adjusted to it. Now they decide, well, the photo IDs that have always been legitimate photo IDs are no longer a legitimate, as, for example, college students. That's the perfect example.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. Oh, no, that idea that people have used for 20 years and is, under the law, a valid state ID, it meets all the 4 criteria of a valid state ID, is no longer allowed. That's how they chip away, and it's I think it was Judge Young down in the Southern District, Richard Young, excellent judge down in the Southern District of Indiana, who said, and I've tried to maintain this for a long time, that they spend so much, the Republican Party, at least certainly here in Indiana, but in many states that are employing all these ways to get around allowing everybody to exercise their right to vote, they say he even said it in his opinion that what this is a solution in search of a problem.
Yeah.
Folks, there is no problem with wholesale, or not even wholesale, but large-scale voter fraud.
Not at all.
It just doesn't happen, hasn't occurred, has never been found, but yet they keep doing these things, claiming this is why we have to do it, to prevent the fraud.
Yeah. I have, being a state legislator at the State House, I have heard that come out of people's mouths so many times. And you're right. Where's the proof? Where give examples. Is this happening 25%, 30%? Oh, wait, it really is not happening at all. It's trying to take away and make it easier for people to vote. And I go back to also one of the things said when we were going through the redistricting, and I'll say that with what we're talking about with here in Indiana with how you can vote. If your policies are good, then why are you trying to eliminate people from voting? If your policies are right and best for people, stand on them.
Yeah.
If not, then maybe you need to change some of the things you're working on because your policies are not good, they're not working, and get it elected or reelected, whatever the case is, based on that, not based on we're going to manipulate the system. That's not the way it should work. Unfortunately, what we've seen happen coming out of Washington, D.C., and what we've seen, hitting other states, including Indiana, is that's what people are doing is our policies aren't good. We want to keep power. How do we manipulate the system?
Yep. That's so true. And so kind of getting towards sort of wrapping this up, Earl, because I know you have many, many commitments, and I am so appreciative of your coming here.
Happy to be here.
I'm really so glad. But in the immediate future, I just see chaos. I see chaos in terms of, because it's going to be tit for tat. If Texas is going to do this, then California is going to do this. And if this red state does that, then this blue state's going to do that.
Yeah.
Which isn't good for any of us.
No, it's not.
I don't care. Republican, Democrat, Independent, I don't care. It's just not good for any of us. I'm just concerned that we're going to find ourselves in a nation of just these very limited perspective districts that you can't get out of, and people will be so it'll be so designed and so gerrymandered for them that you're going to have a Republican district that's going to be a Republican district forever. You're going to have Democrat districts. It's going to be one ad infinitum. Yeah. There's not going to be any competition. People aren't going to want to run for office. I don't know. How do you see that?
The thing you said there, closing out what you said, is not good, is that if people look at this and go, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
And you lose good people. The other thing is, I know you talked about this earlier, is the extremity. I had a conversation during session, and it's a Republican representative. He's not in our area, in a different part of the state. And we just got into a conversation after session one day. And he said, Earl, and he was talking about his own party. And, and depending on what happens, if these people that are primarying Republicans that are in office, we may go even further. But he was talking about his own party and said, my party is moving too far right. He was talking about here in Indiana. He said, I'm pretty far right, and we've elected people that make me look center. And I think that's another concern is and this is a Republican pointing this out to me, is if we have too many people that are too far, and I say this in either direction, it's bad. How do you work together if that happens? And that makes it harder for us to work together. If you have people who, especially if you're in the supermajority, which we have now, who think you're a Democrat, I don't care about you. Why do I worry about you? We can vote on anything, and your voice doesn't matter. And that's not good for democracy.
Yeah. It's not. It's the antithesis of democracy.
Yeah, right.
And it's becoming so frustrating. Man, you and I could probably
this could go on
spend
for a
the
long
whole
time.
day doing this and talking about it. But folks, it's so important. Voting goes to the heart of our democracy.
Right.
And Earl and I were talking about that before we came on, and Earl's about to say, yeah, get your butt off your mom's couch and go out there and vote. And folks, right now, I don't know of another answer. I mean, folks like Earl are going to go downstate. They're going to do the best that they can do for us as a representative, and there's others that are going to do that from other areas. But just hitting on the point that you just made, it's becoming so polarized for the very reasons that you stated, and I don't know that there is any other solution other than we have to turn out the vote.
Right.
We were talking about how, especially in midterms and municipal elections, the voting is just woefully low. At presidential, it still nudges its way up to the 50% area, and here, which still isn't that good.
Yeah.
But we don't achieve the type of vote that we need, which will translate into the type of government that we deserve, right, if we exercise our right to vote. So, despite Supreme Court decisions that are wrong, in my opinion, as an attorney, as a citizen, I believe the Louisiana case is wrong. I believe that Citizens United was wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a whole lot of them. I believe that cases that have limited women's right to reproduction, which goes to something you said, was okay. Are women next? Well, they're kind of in the queue right now, mm-hmm, and that could be what could happen. But we'll leave that for another day. I think it's. I wish it wasn't, but it's time that we wrap up today's podcast. I am so grateful. I truly am that you came here. I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, love to.
When you're Speaker of the House downstate,
I like that. Speaker
like
Harris.
That. We'll really enjoy that one.
Will.
So, at this time, as always, I'm incredibly grateful for all of you who listen to us and watch us. I'm incredibly grateful to our excellent producer, Adriana Alvarez, who, by the way, folks, is graduating this week from college, and she is super happy. And she does a remarkable job over here coordinating all of this. It couldn't be done without her.